Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello. It's good to see everybody waving. Welcome to an NPEN sponsored event. We especially want to welcome our almost 3,000 member Meta community, This NPE Life. Today, I have the privilege of sitting down with Donna Marvin-Platt in our very first interview discussing her film for PBS, Misconceptions. NPEN is a co-sponsor of this film, and we could not be more prouder to be that co-sponsor, Donna, with you. Now to tell you a little bit about Donna. Donna received her BFA in design from Carnegie Mellon University, and Donna has over 30 years in creative direction and experience. She works doing that type of work in the medical advertising field. As a writer and comedian, she wrote and produced the one-person show Life in the Short Lane at the 78th Street Theater Lab in New York City, and created and starred in the short film Many Happy Returns, which was presented at the New York International Independent Film and Video Festival. Misconceptions is her very first feature documentary. Some fun facts about Donna. She's married. I don't know if that's a fun fact, but I think it's a fun fact. She has 2 kids, one in college, one in high school, and she has 2 bunnies. Now I like that. We have 2 bunnies too for our children. I've got 2. That's really interesting that you brought that up. I've got 2. Well, they don't live with me, but we've got 2 bunnies for our kids.
Aww.
This film touched my heart so much, Donna, as you know. Donna and I have gotten to know each other over the last few months discussing this film. And in the last month or so, it's received 3 different awards. The first one is the New York International Film Award for Best Featured Documentary. The second was the Spotlight Documentary Film Award for Excellence in Filmmaking. The third is the Impact Docs Award for Recognition. That's pretty amazing, Donna. So we're going to get to the questions now that we have for Donna, and we want to welcome everybody that's here. We have a good group of people here. We're so happy you're here. As all of you know, if you want to turn off, I don't believe you're being seen at this point, but if you want to turn off your video, please do if you don't want to be known on this at all. And audio should be off. So we will just be having the one-on-one with Donna on the question part. But after the recording, we will go to Q&A, and that will not be recorded. So Donna, the first question I have for you is, you know, when you were making this film, can you describe to us how you utilized the art of filming to tell your story and how it's different than the work you have done in the past as a writer and a comedian? And can you explain a bit to our listeners how you went about self-producing this beautiful independent movie? I guess what I'm asking is, what steps did you take to make this film?
Okay, well, first of all, I wanted to thank you so much, Alicia, for having me here. This is a very special event to be able to participate in and share my experience with all of you. And I do want to say that this film, you know, would not have happened if it weren't for all the people that were brave enough to take part. And that, you know, like Peter Boney, Wendy Kramer, and Albert Franz and Ian Smith, who, you know, they're such wonderful speakers and just so well informed. And then all of my father's friends who agreed to take part, in my sisters, and then of course Mark Strauss, who found me on Ancestry, which if he didn't find me, there'd be no way that I would have known who my father was. So really, this was a bunch of people that, you know, that worked with me to make this film happen, and I'm so very grateful. So so you asked me, how did I go about making this film? Oh my goodness, that's like okay. So let me just say that, like, I had no intention of making a film. I just wanted to know who my father was, and I, you know, found out when I was about 30 that I was donor conceived, and I, you know, was curious, but there was no way to find my father. I thought maybe it was the doctor that used his own sperm, but it wasn't the case. And so it took like 20 years until they came out with the DNA test, until I was able to find him. And then, you know, I thought that would be enough, and just knowing who he was. But then it was like still that curiosity of wanting to know a little bit more, a little bit more. And I think Mark, who found me, it was his wife, who is, you know, my second cousin. They didn't know a whole lot about him. They know some things, but then he told me that, you know, he had all these friends on the West Coast. So I managed to be able to get in contact with them, and they had so much to tell me, and they were so happy to meet me, to know me, because they missed their friend Michael, who was my biological father. They missed him so much, and they were just so grateful to be able to, you know, talk about him and tell me about him. And I think it was because, you know, his friend Sandy was telling me that he so badly wanted to have children later in his life, and he couldn't have children. He didn't have a spouse, uh, and and knowing that, and knowing that he would have loved to have met me, because this is what she told me, that, you know, he would have really loved to have known you and your sisters. And actually, at the time, I didn't know my sisters yet, but after the fact, she said that. And I mean, that just, and the fact that she was so moved and emotional about it. And I was like, you know, when I realized, the more I learned about him, the more I was so touched by the story, and then wanting to know more about him, and just felt like there was an injustice in a way. Like, I don't understand. He would have liked to have known me. I wanted to know him. Why is it that we were never allowed to meet? It just didn't make any sense to me. It seemed like it didn't make sense, and I wanted to understand it. And I wanted and I wanted to take people with me through this journey. I felt like I couldn't do it by myself. And it was an important story, and it seemed so unfair. And so, but I wanted to know more. So, like I said, I wanted to interview all of his friends and go through this whole process and take people with me, because it was scary. I mean, I actually felt like I was trespassing into his life. I had no business being there. But at the same time, I felt like, wait a minute, he's my father. What?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to ask you a question in, from the film itself. I was mesmerized by a particular scene. To me, it was very poignant with my actually newfound Jewishness. Was when you, pretty early on in the film, you, in the documentary, you light I always have trouble saying it, yahrzeit candle. And, you know, in studying what I have of Judaism now, what I've learned about lighting that candle is that it is signifies the soul of a man is a candle of the Lord. So, you know, when you lit that in the beginning, before the documentary even got really getting into the story, my question is, who were you lighting the candle for? Was it for you? Was it for your donor dad? Or was it for the film itself? Or all three?
It was for my donor dad, because now every year I light a candle for my mother, my father, and my donor dad. And, you know, this was such a profound loss. And the thing is that there was like sort of like a double-edged sword to this, because I just, the more I learned about him, the more I learned how much we had in common, the the happier I was. I mean, it was so thrilling. It was just, I can't even describe it. It was just learning more about myself, and this man that I never knew. But at the same time, the more I knew him, got to know him, the more grief I felt at
Yeah.
never meeting him. So, but I needed to mourn his death. And the only way I could mourn
Mm.
his death was to meet him and know him, and then mourn his death, and then let it go. And the only way I was able to go through this process was through this film. I had to go through this whole process. You know,
Well, can
I
I
mean,
ask
this,
you about that process? Because in the film itself, Donna, you actually do a great job with structure. You take us not I mean, not just about your story. You start out, it's like in 4 steps. And what you've done is you're telling your story, then you're telling his story, and then you bring in these newfound siblings that you find, and then you tell the story of the community, those of us here on the call that we're part of that community. Um, I love how you did that, but do you want to
Thank you.
elaborate a little bit about that
Yeah.
process?
So, and you had asked me how I made the film and all of that, and I want to talk about that. So, I had it in my mind what I wanted to do, that I wanted to learn everything I could about my father, and I wanted to document that. Uh, and then when I wanted to know what my sisters, like, did they feel that same sense of loss? And then, you know, when I realized, like, the more upset I was, like, the more I was like, what? Like, how could this have happened? Like, I wanted to ask professionals in the community, like, and I wanted to share all that information to understand, like, why is this still going on? That people are, you know, uh, that donors are still anonymous. That, of course, the regulation too, but I more, the regulation gets, now I'm going off on a tangent. I'm sorry, but, and I'll get
That's
back
okay.
to
That's
how I
okay.
made.
I mean,
Uh,
it's like you're telling your truth, but like those of us on this call, we understand that if you're an NPE yourself, we all know that feeling of like, why is this? Why are we left
but
not knowing these truths? I mean, it's
you
good to
can't.
know how you dealt with by filming the film, how you dealt with
Yes,
this. You were mourning through this film.
yes, I needed to go through that process. It was very important, but I think that, and I'm not angry at anyone specifically, because it's, nobody knows, like, it's not nobody's fault. It's just, they need to know how people who are, either donor conceived, or, don't, all of a sudden find out who their biological parent is. Like, what does that feel like? They don't know. They just, so it's not anybody's fault per se. But I think that, the regulations are very important. And that gets a lot of attention with these sort of stories that you see in these films. But I think the thing that I feel, and I was hoping this film would serve this purpose, that doesn't get enough attention, is the psychological component of being donor conceived, of being a donor,
Mhm.
and then Wendy Kramer also brings this up in the film. Oh, actually, she doesn't, because I cut this part out. The film was too long. I had to keep cutting it. But she talked about the grandparents, and I have to put that in the outtakes, which is another thing people never consider, is what did the grandparents want to know their biological grandchildren, and nobody thinks about that. And what about the person in the family who's not biologically connected to the children? How do they feel? There's a lot of feelings that nobody considers, and nobody, and the clinics and the, the sperm banks aren't going to counsel you, because it's not mandated. So
Exactly.
they only have these films to really educate people on all aspects, like all of these things that one needs to consider
Yeah.
when they're accepting donor gamete, or they're donating or whatever have you. But I
Well,
want to just talk. Sorry.
no, I just wanted to bring you back to about your feelings for a minute. You know, one of the things about this film, uh, you do an amazing job with who you have all in the film, because talking to all the different individuals you have, you're finding out so much information about your donor, but there's a hard part to this story, and I just want to discuss a little bit of that with you, because after you discover who your dad is, you learn some rather really disturbing information about how he passed away. I know that had to been very difficult for you as you were filming this. So I know you found out early on, but when you decided to do this film, you learn even more about his passing, but you also get a glimpse on of how brilliant a man he is, that your bio dad was. We also learn about him that he was a humanitarian, that he was an artist, and I'm going to get back to that part about him being an artist. But one of the people you interview in this documentary, this person says to you that he had such a nourishing soul. That I don't know. I don't know about those of you all on the call, but when I heard that in this documentary, that just broke me, because it was such to me, a really wonderful thing for you to know about him, Donna, that the affirmation of having that information was incredible. And in those very scenes in the film, you know, we, the audience, also get to see something into about your donor. There's artwork all over in this film. And at the time, I wasn't sure why am I seeing all this artwork in this film? You guys, I was fortunate. I got the opportunity to see this film before you all. It's incredible, but you know, let me just ask you about the artwork. Was the artwork intentional, how you placed it everywhere?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. His art, because I'm a visual person, and I felt like his art would be a nice visual theme throughout the film. And that was something we had in common because he was an artist and so am I. So I wanted to use that. And also I wanted to also say, because I didn't get to talk about the film, like how uh, I made the film and how it came about was that, you know, I started interviewing people and I structured it because you talked about the structure. I had to storyboard the whole thing out and the whole thing in the parts and everything. And I started to work with an editor. And then I realized that, you know, and I kept saying, okay, I'm gonna try to get this on a Premiere Pro, which is an editing program, and see if I can get it to a good point where I can give it to you and you can go with it. But the thing was, first of all, I had to teach myself this editing program. I'd never edited in my life. So this program was crazy. And I looked at it like, what the heck? I was like, it was so daunting. And I took like this LinkedIn learning thing and I tried to, and I just kept trying to get this in a better place, in a better place. And then and she kept saying it's really long. It was like 3 hours, 4 hours. And then like the more I learned the program, like I can't give this to her to do. I mean, I was coming up with ideas and animations, and I'm like, I wanted to do this, I want to do that. And I just realized I can't give it to her. I have to tell the story myself. And so the 4 parts, it was really in like 2 parts. And people that saw it would say to me, this is 2 films. You got to do 2 films. I'm like, I can't do 2 films. This has to be one film. So I had to find a way to tie it all together, and because I think it needed the information at the end is important, but it
Yeah.
needed that emotional through line. It needed that story because nobody wants to be lectured to. You know, people want to come to the conclusion themselves. And I felt like my story was something that I was hoping could make people realize how important it is to know where we come from. And that's it's very personal and it's very meaningful. And I, you know, I remember John Bain in his interview was talking about like that when he was a child, he was always like searching. He was searching for something and he didn't know what. And the thing is like I felt that I had this film that I used to watch over and over again. It was I'll never forget it. It was the Shirley Temple film, The Little Princess, and she in this film, her dad is missing in action, or they tell him he's dead, and she doesn't believe it, and she goes to the hospital and looks for him every single day, and she says he's not dead. I'm gonna find him, and I just like was so like that film. I connected with it so much because I don't know. It moved me, and I guess I had a longing for that paternal connection because my relationship with my father wasn't good at all. It was really terrible, and I don't know that I felt like maybe that I don't know what it was, but I always watched that film over and over because she just never gave up, and I think like things, all these people don't realize you grow up feeling these feelings and you don't know why. Like I always felt like a freak in my family. I felt like I was like I don't know, like there was something wrong with me. And I did, and also John talks about his relationship with his father and how he felt guilty that he didn't feel that bond, and I felt that too. And I always thought it was my fault. But I know my dad loved me in spite of the way he treated me, and I loved him too. And we made peace at the end of his life. But I think that if we'd all been honest and open, and I was able to meet my biological father, and I think my dad and I, we would have had a better relationship.
Mhm.
So I know I went
Yeah.
on and on there. I'm
Well, that's
sorry.
okay. No, I can totally appreciate what you're saying. I know there's no way you can tell everything in a documentary when you know you've got to be like 90 minutes or whatever that you're dictated to do it. As I've talked to you before, Donna, about attention span on most people are it's not going to be for 3 or 4 hours. But what you did is you did such an incredible job. I
Thank you.
can't wait till I hear from those of the folks that are in on this call with us to get their viewpoint, because you brought it really home personal. You spoke about John Bame's documentary, Filling in the Blanks, and we interviewed him. He was actually, I believe, our very first interview on my NPEN YouTube channel. And it's true. I mean, he was very fortunate. His donor dad was alive. But the aspect in your situation, I'd say would be the majority of us that do not find our biological parent, be it both or mom or dad or either one, we don't find them alive. And that's the part that we have to grapple with. And I think you did an extraordinary job doing just that, Donna.
Thank
I
you.
want to get back again to your donor dad here for another question. There's a scene in the film that we also learned that was described, your dad was described as a restless soul. But what is incredible is that you got various other interesting details about him, not just that. You were very fortunate to be given an insight into your father that many of us who have had a DNA shock do not get at all. But at the same time, as the old saying goes, be careful for what you ask for. Do you think, with all that you gained from this experience, do you feel better knowing than not knowing? And the reason I'm going to bring that up, most people in our community, in our meta community, we took uh, polls, and over 90% are glad that they know their truth. It's a very small percentage that do not know their truth. And that, to me, speaks a lot about where people are now in our culture, where we're at now, and just in our lives, as opposed to what our parents were going through 60, 70 years ago. So for me, I guess I want to know, do you actually feel better knowing all that you know now?
Of course. Oh my God. Because you you feel like there's something and you don't know what it is. And for me, I couldn't trust my own instincts growing up. And these my instincts were telling me that there was something amiss.
Right.
And you had asked me about my father's and the way he died, and you
Yes.
asked me if that was troubling to me. And I want to tell you that when I knew a little bit about that before the film, which kind of made me want to make the film. And so I already knew it was much more important to me to just know every detail about him. I became obsessed about it. I mean, I was calling his girlfriends, I was calling his art teachers. I was like, I was all over the place. I mean, so anything good or bad, I wanted to know every little thing because that's all I had. I didn't have him, so
Yeah.
um but what I did learn in doing the film, I learned some interesting things that I didn't know, which was how much he wondered about his biological children. I didn't realize that he actually talked about us,
That,
and then
yeah, that was incredible.
yeah,
That was
but
incredible what you learned.
yeah, and then that's what propelled me to talk to a donor and to find out, well, what does the donor feel? Some don't. I know. I mean, he's just one donor. Not all donors maybe feel that way, but I think for the most part, and from what he told me from his research, Ian Smith, was
Right.
that the donors do think about their biological children. I mean, I think that's normal. I think that anybody, you don't realize when you donate that you're actually, like, to you it's just like blood or something, but until you realize that's a person, when they grow up
Yeah,
and you're like, oh my God,
that's right.
like, you don't think these a lot of people don't anticipate all the emotions that come along with either, accepting donor gametes or, donating. So
Well, you
yeah.
actually dealt with a lot of very, very complicated storylines due to the way your father passed away. And I think anyone that watches this is going to be so amazed at how you dealt with a very delicate situation about his death, how he lived his life, his mistakes, and also his successes. He was an absolutely incredible man. But what came with that very incredible person was a very complicated person. And I think learning those things, I think what's going to happen in this film when people look at it, they're going to understand more about how they feel. It will help them come
Good.
around in their own, it's obviously your donor was your donor, but when I look at it, I begin to think about my own biological father, about the mistakes that he made in his life, the successes he had in his life. And what you've done is you take both of those and you bring you bring both sides of his story through, and there's no biases. There's no judging, which I loved how you handled it, Donna. It was really beautiful. But I love to end my interviews in a way that brings a little bit of light. So I just have to share this. It just kind of made me, I always LOL, laugh out loud. This part of your film made me laugh out loud. Someone in the film actually said that when they were looking at you, that it was like, it is like talking with your dad in drag. I thought that was hysterical. It's hysterical. Did those kind of moments about everything that you dealt with in this film balance out the difficult things you were also hearing?
Yes, there's a lot of funny parts to the film. And
Yeah.
that was what, well, but it was nice to know that there was something about me that reminded her of my father. Like it wasn't just the way I looked, it was the personality or something in the way I was like moving or something. I don't know. It's,
Well,
yeah.
I
So
can't wait what people say about the artwork in your film. You talk about the moving parts in this film. It's so different. I mean, I love what you did with your artist hat on. So it's not only you had several hats on here. I mean, producing, directing, writing. I mean, it's your story. So I just want to give you I don't know. I give you a lot of credit for everything you did with it being your very first rodeo with this. You did an incredible job. And, Donna, I want to thank you so much
thank
for
you.
sharing so eloquently about this really brilliant film. I am so proud that NPEN, which stands for NPE nurses, or nurses for NPEs, NPE meaning not parent expected. We co-sponsored this film for Donna, and we expect that there's going to be so many people that are going to fall in love with this.
Oh,
Can
thank
you
you.
share the last question I have for you? Can you share with the audience where they can see this film?
Yeah, so it's airing nationally, but I don't know, where and when, but if you have the PBS app on your Roku TV or your smart TV, Samsung or whatever, or you download it for free and just search Missed Conceptions and it will be there.
That's great. That's really good to hear. At some notes that we will put on our YouTube channel will be websites to NPEN and the work we're doing, helping our community out. We have one of our nurses, I believe, a couple nurses here on the call with us today. We help those in acute distress when they first find this out. If you can imagine somebody in their 50s, which is what I was in my 50s, finding this information out, and what the shock that did to me and to those of us that are on this call. We know what that feels like. And we didn't have, for myself 10 years ago, I didn't have anybody. I didn't have anybody to talk to. So now we have such a huge community. You can go anywhere and you can get the help you need. But we have decided as a group of nurses, professionals, that we wanted to be those on the front line helping those, and if you will, triaging and helping out where we can. So we want to thank you so much. We are going to be ending the recording and going to Q&A with those that are left on this call. And we're just so grateful that we had you here. So I think
Thank you for having me. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
it was just great. So I'm